The kind neighbor. It was the summer of 2021 and the hottest day in July. Temperatures reaching nearly 37 degrees Celsius. The windows were down in my 96 Honda Civic hatchback. Sweat pooling on my back and penetrating through my t-shirt. It was that damn hot. Man, do I wish there was air conditioning in this car, I thought. It was brutal driving anywhere during the warmer seasons. I took a napkin lying next to the passenger seat and wiped the dripping sweat off of my face. I needed to get hydrated, fast. I pulled up at the nearest Tim Hortons coffee shop and went through the drive-thru. I spoke into the speaker. "Hi, can I have 2 large ice caps?" My cell phone starts to ring and I pick it up. It's my boyfriend. He asks me how much longer until I make it to Newcastle, Ontario. I check the GPS app on the phone and it reads 10 minutes. I'll be there soon, just grabbing us a few cold drinks. He was grateful and asked if I managed to get the last of the boxes to fit in the car. I let him know it was a bit crammed, but I made it work. I hung up the phone, and by then the barista hands me a tray with my drinks. I grabbed the exact change from the little compartment near the driver door and hand it over to the barista. I then hopped back on the highway while sipping on the cold drink and the wind blowing through my hair. I felt my body cooling down. I was pretty relaxed. The dashboard clock read 4:35 p.m. as I pulled into the driveway. I saw that my boyfriend had unloaded boxes near the front entrance of the house. He was probably inside the house placing boxes. I turned off the car and took my keys out of the ignition. I popped open the trunk and got out of the car. There were 3 medium boxes and 2 large garbage bags in my trunk. I carried each one out one by one and left it with the rest of the boxes by the front door. I came back, closed the trunk, and grabbed the ice caps, then locked my door and made my way back to the front door. At that moment, my boyfriend walked out, nearly startling me. I caught my breath and gave him a peck on the lips. "It's good to see you. After the week I've had, it's nice to be able to be together," I said, as I handed him his drink. "Me too," said Jake, taking a sip of his cold coffee. "Ah, that hits the spot." "Emily," he began, "can you believe we finally can call ourselves first-time homeowners?" "I know," I said. "With the pandemic looming over us and the real estate market prices rising in Toronto, owning a home for millennials like us is becoming even harder." We both sat on the porch finishing our drinks when the next-door neighbor drove his white BMW X SUV into his driveway. His window was completely down and he was waving at us. Jake and I smiled back. The man got out of his van and crossed his driveway, then walked onto the lawn next to our porch. He looked like he was in his early 40s, about 5'7", dark hair, and wearing beige cargo shorts with a white undershirt and an open-button collared Hawaiian shirt on top. He stood about 3 meters from us. "Hey, I'm Carl. I would shake your hand, but social distancing. You must be the new homeowners." "Yes," said Jake, "that's us. I'm Jake and this is my girlfriend Emily." I gently smiled and said hello. "The people that lived here before you were also a young couple," he said. "They were about 3 years here, then moved further up north to Peterborough, Ontario. I guess the whole remote working has made people's lives a bit more flexible," he said, laughing. "It definitely has made productivity level for those working from home go up," I said. "I guess it's a win situation for the most part, except for the extended working hours." "Do you work from home?" asked Carl. "Well," I replied, "I'm a freelance artist. I paint portraits of people and landscapes. I guess that's the downside to this whole COVID situation. Small businesses like myself felt the struggle. Sadly to say, some have closed their storefronts forever. Slowly, though, as these restrictions are easing," I said, "I'm able to meet with my clients and orders sort of been picking up." "That's what I love about Emily," said Jake. "She manages to keep pushing forward in all kinds of difficult times." "That's great to hear," said Carl. "Best of luck to you with that, and maybe I could get you to design a portrait of me and my dog Coco. I need some color back in my life after my wife, Caitlin, passed away 5 years ago. Jake and I both offered our condolences. Anyways, said Carl, welcome to Roswell Drive. This street is pretty much a community of its own. We usually throw the annual barbecue parties at a park not too far from here, except it's on hold this year until the virus spread lessens. Lots of kids around here, but it's quiet a lot of the time, which is nice, unless you young kids are used to the city life. Actually, I said, my parents live in the West End in the heart of downtown. I don't mind visiting them or hanging out with friends, but to live there, not so much. Jake and I prefer something like this, as you say, a quiet neighborhood. Well, you'll love it here then, said Carl. He politely then excused himself and went into his house. What a great welcoming, I thought. It had been a week in the new house and we were still settling in. Most of the unpacking was done, just a couple minor things needed organizing. Jake got a call from his boss and had to leave for a few days for work. He's a software engineer for a private e-commerce company. Sometimes he has to attend meetings in person to run progress reports. Because of the pandemic and very little opportunity to go into the office, I guess Jake enjoyed the drive to the west to kind of have that sense of social interaction with a few of his colleagues. He gave me a kiss and told me to take care of myself. He will be back Wednesday. I told him not to worry, I'll be fine in this big house. There was still lots to do to make it feel like home. He told me he'd be staying at my parents' condo in downtown Toronto as it was a 6-minute walk from his work. It was about 3 p.m. when Jake left. I cleaned the dishes in the sink and put on another pot of coffee. I sat down on my chair next to my easel and decided to finish a piece of artwork for a client. It was a landscape of a forest, the trees reflecting in the water, a full moon with tons of stars in the sky. It was a serene and beautiful image. I wish it was reality. I would love to go there. I looked at the clock on my phone. It was 7:20 p.m. Crap, I thought. I lost track of time. I didn't feel like making dinner as my fridge needed major groceries and I wasn't in the mood to shop or eat another cup of ramen noodles. I decided to go to the nearest McDonald's and pick up a 10-piece chicken nugget meal. I grabbed my car keys and headed out the door. The sun was slowly setting and the pink and purple hues colored the sky. As I was getting into the car, my eyes caught something. It was Carl, looking down at me from the top floor window of his house. The look wasn't as pleasant from the first meeting we had. It was kind of creepy. I gave him an awkward smile and drove away. I looked in my rear view mirror and he was still standing in the window. It was just odd. When I returned home, I quickly got out of the car and glanced at Carl's window. He wasn't there. So I rushed into the house and closed the door. Things were fine the next day. I was able to finish the painting and spoke briefly with Jake. I didn't mention the Carl behavior because maybe I was just overthinking. That night, I went to take a shower and I heard the doorbell ring. I wrapped a robe around me and I was still patting my hair dry. I peered out the front window and by the door, it showed the porch. It was pouring rain and a bit windy. No one was there. Maybe it was the wind, I thought. I turned on the TV and was scrolling through new releases on Netflix. I put a pouch of popcorn in the microwave. When it was done, I grabbed a bowl, and as I was pouring the popcorn into the bowl, I looked up at the window. I nearly dropped the popcorn in fear. Carl had his hands cupped over his face, looking in. He was drenched from the rain. I yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" He was really messed up for invading my property and my privacy. Carl then walks away from the window. I grab my phone and start to text Jake when the doorbell rings. Now I know I shouldn't have done this because in most horror films, answering the door ends badly. I look out the porch window and there it is. It's Carl. I turn on the porch lights and slowly open the door a crack. "Carl, why are you looking through my window at 11 o'clock at night?" I said. "You really scared me." He apologized, saying how he didn't have my number and wasn't sure if I was awake. He was holding a tin. "I picked this up from the local bakery," he said. "They have some delicious stuff, highly addicting. I just wanted to give this to you and Jake as a housewarming." "Thanks," I replied, still pretty creeped out about his actions. I opened the door a little bit more to grab the box. Carl said maybe I could come in and you and Jake and I could have a few cookies with tea or something. I didn't want him to know I was alone, so I said Jake is in the shower, he had a long day at work, he's pretty tired. "Oh, okay," Carl said. "I didn't see his car in the driveway. I thought maybe he was on his way home and I could keep you company until he got here so we can all hang out." At this point, I'm getting anxious and nervous. I tell him Jake's car was at the shop for repair, it was having a transmission issue. Carl then had a weird smirk on his face. "Oh, all right then, I'll leave you two. Have a good night." I immediately closed the door, put the latch on and the alarm, and threw away the cookies. As a nice gesture as it was, Carl was sneaking around, and I kind of felt a sense of intrusion and unsafe. I didn't trust him or those cookies. I texted Jake to call me as soon as he could. I locked the room door and fell asleep with a knife by my side. The next morning, I checked my phone and had 5 missed calls from Jake with a text that said, "So sorry, I called you quite a few times. I was working late and then your parents cooked me a nice dinner. Is everything okay? I'll be home tonight." I didn't want to tell Jake about the whole story through text, so I said, "Okay." I eagerly was waiting until then. Around noon, I was making a quick sandwich with a glass of lemonade when the doorbell rang. I was expecting a package for new paintbrushes, so I rushed to open the door without looking out onto the porch. To my surprise, and followed by sheer and dread, was Carl. "Hi, neighbor," he said. "Hey, Carl," I replied. He had his dog Coco next to him. "So," he said, "I remember making a request for you to paint myself and my buddy here. I have the perfect setting in my house. It's clean and sanitized, of course. And I'll pay you double." The money sounded great, I thought, but there was no way I was going into his house alone after the weird stuff he had done while Jake was away. "Thanks," I said. "I really appreciate the offer. Maybe we can try a portrait outside here. I just don't feel comfortable during a pandemic like this to go into anyone's house. I could even paint from a picture of you and Coco if you can tell me what background you were thinking." Carl gave me that wicked smirk again. It really wasn't friendly at all. "Sure, I'll see what I can do." At that moment, Jake pulls into the driveway. "Oh, looks like your boyfriend's car is good as new," said Carl. "Yep," I said hesitantly, hoping Jake didn't blow his cover that he wasn't home all this time and his car was fine. Jake got out of the car and said hello to Carl and asked him how he was doing. I interrupted them both and told Jake I had lunch prepared for him. "Catch you two later," said Carl, and went into his house. Jake and I walked inside our home. I gave him a huge hug. "Hey," he said, "nice to see you too, but what was that all about? You kind of were in a hurry to get me away from Carl. Did you miss me that much?" "I'm glad you came home earlier," I said. Jake told me how work wrapped up early and he wanted to surprise me. He asked me if I was okay because something seemed off. I asked him to sit down and from start to finish told the story. Jake was very irritated, angry, but also worried. He told me not to answer the door at all going forward, and that he would tell his boss that he would be unable to attend in-person meetings for a bit. That way he could monitor if Carl acts the same way when he is around. The next few weeks, Jake installed quite a few cameras around our property and occasionally reviewed the footage. We had to have proof in case Carl behaved inappropriately, and we had to involve the police. Carl hadn't rang our doorbell for the rest of the summer. It was the last week of August when we heard a truck outside. We looked through the window and saw a moving truck right next to Carl's house. People were loading the truck, but Carl was nowhere to be found. Jake went up to one of the movers and asked what was going on. The nephew of Carl said his uncle sold the house and was downgrading to a condo in Richmond Hill. The listing was off the market, so it was privately sold. Jake told him he was sorry to hear. Maybe the memories in the house with his wife were too much. Carl's nephew looked at Jake with a slightly raised eyebrow and said, "Carl doesn't have any kids, and I was the closest thing next to him, but if he ever had a wife, I would know because he was never married." Jake was shocked at what he heard, but he held his composure. When he came back inside, he told me what had happened. I was happy Carl was gone and our house was secure, but also really appalled that he lied to us. Aren't most neighbors supposed to be kind, if not at least cordial, with minimal pleasant small talk? I was glad I would never see him again, and I sort of was relieved that he was moving into a condo. That way the chances of him creeping into some woman's window was impossible. A holiday fright. As long as I've lived in Vancouver, Canada, we rarely got snow. Maybe a few centimeters at a time. Not like the eastern provinces like Toronto. They definitely have so many bitter winters well into the negatives, like minus 35 degrees Celsius, and snowstorms with 25 centimeters accumulating at once. And not just one, but multiple snowstorms throughout the season. I would never move out there. I mean, Vancouver isn't any better. It rains a lot here. Kind of gets dark, depressing, and gloomy. But hey, they call it beautiful British Columbia for a reason. The nature, the scenic experience is why people don't mind the frequent rain so much, because the sun comes out shortly after, and it's worth it. This past December was a bit colder than usual, and the Weather Network was reporting potential snowfall closer to Christmas that would impede on the morning commute and possibly a stay-at-home order. The last time schools were even closed here was 10 years ago when I was in 5th grade. I'm 20 years old now. So I guess it was hard to believe those predictions, as most of the time the meteorologists weren't too accurate about the snow around here. My cell phone rang. It was my boss from the grocery store. I really didn't want to pick up the phone. I finished my last university exam last week, and since my boss knew that I'll be free during the holidays, I was getting more shifts at the Real Canadian Superstore. I finally gave in and answered the phone. It was my boss, Morgan. "Hey, Gracie," she said, "sorry to trouble you. I know it's Christmas Eve and all, but I got a cancellation from George, and you're the on-call scheduled. Would you be able to cover for him? It's time and a half today." Oh man, I thought. George is always finding some excuse not coming into work. He's still a teen and a hardcore gamer. He probably stayed up last night playing Fortnite or something with his buddies. I asked Morgan what the start time was, and she said 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. "Sure, I'll take it," I said. "Oh, by the way," said Morgan, "looks like we'll be having a crazy white Christmas." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, did you have a look outside? The snow is piling up. So far we have 10 centimeters of snow, and then another 15 is expected through the afternoon and late evening." I got up from my bed and walked to the window. I looked outside. "Shit," I said, "it's pretty bad out there. Look, Morgan, I might be an hour late. I have to get dressed and shovel my car out." "That's completely fine, Gracie," she said. "Don't forget to wear the holiday red t-shirt." She thanked me and hung up the phone. Just great, I thought sarcastically. All I really wanted to do was sleep in, eat a late lunch, watch a chick flick with my roommate, maybe share a couple bottles of wine, and go back to bed. Obviously, I would have loved to spend the holidays with my family, but they live in Toronto and I couldn't afford a trip anywhere. Plus, I've never been to the so-called six during the winter months. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't like the snow so much. I would always visit during the spring or summer, and most Christmases, my family and I would take a vacation to a hot destination. It's been 3 solid years since our annual trip. It's because I'm currently in my 3rd out of 4th year studying to become a youth care worker. With school tuition, rent, groceries, all of that was already so expensive. That's why I didn't bother dating anyone, because I wouldn't be able to reciprocate a fancy dinner out. Man, I wish my parents hadn't moved 6 years ago to Toronto. I would have a place to visit during the holidays, or why didn't they wait until I graduated university at least? No, I thought that would be selfish, as I put on a pair of black leggings that looked like dress pants and the red company holiday shirt Morgan had asked me to wear. I quickly downed my coffee. I opened my roommate Shannon's door. I told her I had to go into work, and if she needed anything from the store for tonight's dinner, to just text me. Shannon, who was still in bed, said, "Okay, be safe out there." I spent nearly 40 minutes shoveling our landlord's driveway while my car was turned on warming up. It was the least I could do, as they were in their early 70s and they allowed us to rent their basement at $550 a month with utilities included. That was a bargain. If we handed the rent even a few days late, they wouldn't even make a fuss. They were just so kind. I got into the car and headed to work. Traffic was moving slower than usual, but when I checked my GPS, it said I would be there 5 minutes earlier. When I got to work, I went upstairs and clocked in. I came back down and counted my till at Register 7, did the required paperwork before opening my lane for shoppers. The store was packed. So many last-minute customers. It looked like Black Friday, even though there were no sales. I know the merchandisers who will be closing are going to be losing it at the end of the night with all the sorting and organizing for another chaotic day, Boxing Day. I will make sure my phone is turned off that day. I'm not picking up any shifts, especially for George. Around 3:30, I went on my half-hour break. I grabbed a ready-made salad as I had skipped breakfast rushing to work this morning. I checked my phone around 6:15 p.m. and seen that Shannon had messaged me a list of things for tonight's low-key hangout session. I paged Morgan to call me. She did almost immediately, and I asked her if I could leave about 20 minutes earlier so I could shop for some items I needed. She said no problem, as the crowd had died down and the store was practically empty. I went over Shannon's list while going up through the aisles. She mentioned to bring some cured meats, cheese, crackers, fruits, bread, a spicy fruit spread, just some fancy snacks, and no real dinner was the plans for tonight. I did in fact grab a couple prepared meals like wings, chicken strips, and soup, just in case one of us craved more food after but were too tipsy from the wine to make anything. I went through lane 8, where one of my coworkers, Drew, was working. He seemed really tired. He told me he did a double shift and couldn't wait to get home to his dog and change into warm clothes. When it came time to pay, I couldn't find my credit card, and I had no cash. It was really embarrassing. The total was $85. I told Drew to take the next customer and move my items to the other conveyor belt. I remembered I filled up gas the night before and had left the credit card in one of the door compartments. There was a man behind me who offered to pay for my items. I appreciated his offer but told him I'll be fine. He insisted it's Christmas and a time for giving. I told him it's okay not to worry about it and that I'll be right back with my payment. I pushed through the snow, which was nearly up to my knees, and found my car also to be completely buried. I moved as much as I could of the snow and opened the driver's seat of the car. I grabbed my credit card, locked the door, and headed back to the store. My boots must have had a hole somewhere because my socks were drenched. The store was closing soon, so I had no time to run and pick up a new pair. It wouldn't have made any sense because I had to go right back out anyway. It was 6 minutes until closing, and Drew's line was empty. My groceries were also packed. I handed a card to him, but he said the guy behind me had already paid for it. Seriously, I told him to just leave it, I said. I wasn't trying to sound ungrateful, but I'm not used to kind gestures from strangers. Morgan then walks up to Drew's lane. "Hey guys, get ready for store closing." Drew told a quick version of the customer who paid for my groceries. Drew said he was also pretty cute too. I told Drew to calm down. On a not-so-kind note, Morgan said that the weather is pretty brutal outside, that a few employees had to ditch their cars and take an Uber home. "What about you, Gracie? Will you be okay to plow your way out of here?" said Morgan. I told Morgan I will give it my best shot, but if I could still get permission from management to leave my car here, just in case. She told me that it wouldn't be a problem. I went back out into the dark and began moving snow. I started the car and it just wouldn't budge. After 15 minutes of trying, I called an Uber. Suddenly, a Ford pickup truck pulls up behind my Toyota Camry. It was the man who paid for my groceries. He must have been about 26. "Hey, you need a ride home? The roads are treacherous and I doubt your car will be able to get you home safe." "No," I replied, "I should be fine. I already called for an Uber. But thank you for offering and thanks for paying for my groceries. You really didn't have to." "What's your name?" I asked. "Anthony," he said. "Well, you're welcome, Gracie." The Uber pulls up by my car. "That's my ride," I say. "Merry Christmas." He replies, "Merry Christmas." When I got home, it was past 8:30. I went to shower while Shannon was setting the table for us. After I changed into my PJs and came out, I felt so relaxed I could fall asleep at that exact moment. The food was nicely organized in the living room coffee table with candles lit around it and a nice bottle of Australian sparkling Moscato with 2 wine glasses. Shannon walked over to the couch with a mug in her hand. "After the day you've had, I think you deserve a nice cup of hot chocolate," she said. "I thought you'd also like to be cozying up with a blanket, so I set up the food here." "That was such a sweet idea," I said. "You're super caring and I love that about you." Shannon sat next to me and we were just having a casual conversation when there was a knock at the door. "Who could that be?" I said. "I don't know," said Shannon. "I didn't invite anyone over and Greg's spending it with his family. It's about 2 hours away from us." I told her to carefully open the door. I took another sip of my hot chocolate and then I heard a recognizable voice trailing into the living room. "Hey, sorry to bother you at this hour, but is Gracie home?" Whoever it was looking for me. Curiosity struck me. I wrapped the throw blanket around me and walked to the front door. "Anthony? What are you doing here?" Did he follow me home, I thought? Why is he stalking me? My heart started pumping faster and the adrenaline rushing. "Gracie, hey again." I rang the front doorbell, but the owners directed me to the side entrance of the house. "I didn't mean to be intruding on your Christmas Eve. It's pretty out of character for me to go as far as this." He handed me a card. "After you drove off in the Uber, I found this," he said. It was my driver's license. "Thanks," I said with a slight hesitation. "I thought when you went to pick up your car, you wouldn't want to drive without it." "For sure," I said, forcing a smile. "Well, I'll be on my way then. I have plans with my friends." "Merry Christmas again," said Anthony, and he walked towards his truck. I closed the door and walked back to the living room. "What was that about?" asked Shannon. I told her the story from start to finish. Shannon likes to give the benefit of the doubt to people. She thought he was coming from a place of goodness. I wasn't going to argue with her on that. After all, it was Christmas almost. Yet, I still couldn't help but think why he didn't hold on to it and give it to someone at my work. The worst part is now, he knows where I live. What if he comes back to hurt me? I don't know what his intentions are, if not to just help someone innocently, but it did give me the creeps. I guess I'll have to wait and see, but I do hope I never see him again. I might just consider moving, maybe even switching provinces. Toronto isn't starting to sound bad after all. The hangout spot. It was 8 p.m. on a Friday night and I had just wrapped up with my last client. I filed my notes, grabbed my things, and locked my office door. I walked to the lobby. The receptionist had left for the day. It was real quiet. I looked at the other rooms with the glass doors and I could see no lights were on. I guess I was the last to leave. I turned off the lobby room lights and locked the front door. I took the elevator down and exited the building. It was the typical April, raining as hard as possible. I stood under the shaded area of the building. I opened the Uber app for my phone and typed in the address for the bar that I visited most Friday nights. It was a brisk 10-minute walk, but with all this rain and no umbrella, I would be drenched before I even got there. Even though it was pouring, downtown Toronto seemed to be alive and busy. So many taxis, Lyfts, and Ubers were pulling up to businesses along the road. I had about 3 minutes until mine arrived. My phone began ringing. It was my buddy Corey. "Hey Mitchell, are you coming down to the usual hangout spot, or is the doctor going to call it a night?" I laughed and told Corey that, although I had 9 patients today, I could lend an extra few hours to a friend and give him some free psychological advice. The Uber pulled up shortly after and I got in. The drive was about 7 minutes because of traffic. Otherwise, it would have been 3 minutes. I was feeling a bit tired, but I did need some time away from work. I felt like it was consuming my life. I needed a bit of a break. I thanked the Uber driver and walked into the bar. There was top 40s music being played by DJ in the corner of the room. There was a large dance floor and about 12 tables and a huge bar that ran across and was 18 feet high. The lights were dim, creating a very intimate vibe. I sat down on a stool next to the bar, and a familiar face greeted me. "Hey Todd," I said. "How's your night?" "It's been pretty wild so far," he said. "Might get crazier with customers as the night goes on." Todd wiped his hands clean with a cloth. "What can I grab you? An old-fashioned?" "That would be great," I replied. I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and saw Corey. "Buddy, you made it," he said. "I wouldn't stand you up," I replied. "So, why not take a seat next to me?" I said. "Hold that thought," he said. "I'm going to get someone I'd like you to meet. She's about 2 blocks from here." "Sure," I replied. "I'll be right here when you get back." When I turned back towards the bar, I saw, to my right side, a woman who was about 6'2", could be late 30s, medium build, very curvy, long red hair, big green eyes. She was wearing a fitted black leather mid-length dress and a long gold necklace. She was very attractive. I downed my drink and ordered another. Todd brought me my drink promptly as he moved on and took the woman's order. "I'll have a vermouth spritz, please." I held my glass up in cheers motion when she got her drink. She smiled back and said, "You come here often?" "Most Fridays, I meet up with my friends for a few drinks and casual banter," I said. "Sounds like a good time. I was actually expecting to meet up with a blind date here, but just got a text that something came up and so we canceled," she said. "Ah, the no-show. I've been there. Sorry about that," I replied. "I'm Sonia, by the way," she said, extending her hand. "Mitchell," I responded, shaking her hand. I took another couple sips of my drink as I engaged in conversation with Sonia. "I work for a pharmaceutical company," she said. "It's a bit uptown, but I do like to visit this part of the city. There's something about the atmosphere and people. It's a great social place." I knocked down the rest of my drink, but at this point, I felt very different. It wasn't like a drunk or tipsy feeling. I couldn't even understand what Sonia was saying. I saw her lips moving, but no idea what the hell she was talking about. I called Todd over. "Did you do something different to the drink tonight? Maybe added a little more alcohol?" "No," said Todd. "It's the same recipe, just the way you like it." I started to sweat. I looked over at Sonia. "Will you excuse me just 1 minute? I have to use the restroom." "Is everything okay?" she asked with concern. "Yes," I said. I struggled to get up from the stool. I don't know how I made it to the bathroom in time. Everything around me was spinning. I hovered over the sink, trying to catch my balance, and opened the tap. I flushed cold water on my face, hoping it would make a difference. I still felt the same. Half my shirt was covered with water stains. I stumbled back out. It was a real struggle to get back to the bar. I sat back on the stool and caressed my temples. Something was happening to me. Sonia wasn't at the bar, but her purse was. Todd walked over to me and said that she had gone to use the bathroom. She ordered you another old-fashioned, as he placed it in front of me. "Thanks," I replied, "but I don't think I'll be having another drink for the rest of the night." I felt like I was slurring my words at this point. Todd asked me if I needed an Uber. Sure, I said. I don't think Corey will be back anytime soon. In my head, I thought he probably changed his plans when he met up with his lady friend. For some reason, my eyes stopped on Sonia's purse. It was open. Now, I didn't want to invade on her privacy, but I never drank myself to the state where I can't articulate or control my body. To come to think of it, I started feeling this way when she got here. I peered into her bag. That's where I saw it. Pill bottles, and next to it was a knife. I was shocked and stumbled back, trying so hard not to pass out. Then it clicked to me. She must have slipped the drug into my drink when my back was turned, earlier when I was talking to Corey before he left to pick up his date. I told Todd to call 911 fast. Something was up with this woman. While he was in the middle of the call, Sonia came back. "You ready to get out of here?" she said. "I'm okay," I replied. "My friend should be here soon." She laughed. "I'm sure you were stood up just like I was." She tried to help me up, and I tried to resist, but then fell to the floor. At that moment, Corey arrives with the woman he was trying to get me to meet earlier. He saw me on the ground and ran over to help me. "You okay, buddy? I think I've been drugged by that woman." He looked up to Sonia and spewed some profanities. "Did you do this?" he said. She played dumb and was in the middle of grabbing her purse and walking out the door when the police showed up. I couldn't stay awake any longer, so I knocked out. But from what I was told the next day, her purse was looked through and she was arrested. I've been stuck wondering how someone who seemed so nice could be evil. What was she planning on doing to me had I left with her? What did she want? Is she a serial killer? Were there other victims? I got shivers up and down my spine. Had Corey not shown up, I would have been a goner. It's been 2 months since the incident. I've been avoiding to go back to the bar where this traumatizing thing happened, but I also didn't want this one experience to stop me from going to my favorite place. I will be going there tonight, but this time, and others to come, I'll be sure to go with a couple of my friends. I'll never really trust to be alone with any stranger at the bar, or leave my drink unattended for 1 second. That's the best advice I could give to you listeners. Be safe. Where there is fun, there is also danger. As for the woman, Sonia, I hope she gets what she deserves. I never want to be face to face with her. Hey, Scary Story fans! I'm Suzanna Dutt, and thanks for listening to these short tales written and narrated by me. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have a creepy story that's fiction or non-fiction and would like me to share it in the next featured video, feel free to email it to the address in the description below. In the meantime, sweet dreams.